not a lot of note happens in Wyk aan Zee. It's just another windswept village on the North Sea coast of Holland that comes to life only for the brief summer season. So just under 10 years ago, the municipal authorities were a bit perplexed about what to do when local GP Dr Van Oudvorst came and reported to them that he'd killed a patient.
The prosecutor said, of course, this is, in legal way spoken, this is murder. So we look in your files and we'll see if we prosecute you, yes or no. Because if you're then...
It was Wyk aan Zee's first notified case of euthanasia, but it was dealt with without the sort of public outcry you'd expect in, say, an Australian seaside resort.
And a few weeks later, were very horrible weeks, I got a letter and with, again, thanks for the admitting, and everything was done as it should be done, and it was very... They told me it was done very well, so they won't prosecute me for murder.
No further action?
No further action.
Great relief.
Yeah, but I have a record. How a criminal record is called? Yeah, I have a criminal record.
This is George van Luijk, 56 years old and very recently a widower. "12 weeks ago, he sat at his wife's bedside and watched her die when Dr Van Oudvorst gave her a lethal injection.
This is my third day on the water. I like it still. I can almost sail a little bit.
George has always wanted to learn to sail. Now it's a way of helping to cope with having lost his wife Henny after 30 happy years.
I can relax my mind, and that's good. Yes, that's good. It's not that I forget, or I don't want to remember, but I can relax a little more. And that's good. That's good.
As a person, it's going, how to say, it is like going through hell. I think it is. You know, Henny will die. You know the patient will die. What you do. She will die. But it is your hand which makes it quicker. But on the other hand, it is your hand who helps the person die in a soft, nice way, not with suffering.
En er spuit twee middelen, een slaapmiddel en een dodelijk middel. Maar toen was ze nog aan het lachen. Ze lachte, echt hardop lachte ze. En toen ging de slaapmiddel erin. En in één keer, de lach was stil. De kleur uit het gezicht was weg. En haar mond viel open. Dat was het.
The stories of Dr Van Oudvorst and of George van Luijk would provoke outrage and controversy in most societies. In the Netherlands, they no longer provoke even a raised eyebrow. On average, every day in Holland, at least 10 terminally ill people die by euthanasia with the assistance of a doctor. And it's legal.
You can imagine people looking at the Netherlands and reacting with horror, saying, well, you have a society here where the society is actually helping people to commit suicide.
That's in other countries is the same, but they don't talk about it, and we talk about it. And that's the difference between other countries, in my opinion, that we talk on every corner of the street about these issues.
The Dutch do talk these issues through and manage to reach consensus on a remarkable range of topics that seem to elude so many other nations. So when some 25 years ago, doctors started to publicly admit they were helping their patients to die rather than face unbearable suffering, there was no great demand to lock 'em up.
There's a Dutch word, gedogen, which broadly translated means tolerance of attitudes and ways of behaviour which are not necessarily condoned politically or legally. Gedogen beleid is a policy of tolerance, live and let live. And that's allowed euthanasia to gradually filter its way up through Dutch society until it's gained broad support amongst the community, until eventually the politicians have had the courage to legalise it.
And it's gedogen that seems to keep Holland at the cutting edge of liberal social reform. Take Amsterdam's coffee shops. At the Damkring, you can openly buy a range of hashish and cannabis to smoke here or take away, and yet it remains technically illegal to sell such drugs in Holland.
It's not legal, it's not illegal, it's gedogen. There is a law that says you cannot sell drugs, but...
Erik Boortsman has been openly selling a big selection of dope at the Damkring coffee shop for 8 years and never been busted. Why? Because the community doesn't think it's damaging society, so the police don't see a need to act. And what's more, it's good business.
And when this became, let's say, bigger, then the police started thinking, well, hey, we have to do something here. And I don't think it was because there was lots of trouble, but I think it was an economic thought. People are making money and we're not. Let's get in there and bring the tax people and see how we can get some money as well. And I think that's the reason why they started making rules in the 1980s.
As for the doomsayers who predicted such tolerance would inevitably lead to a tidal wave of hard drug addiction, they've been proved wrong. Holland has the lowest heroin addiction rate of any developed nation. And as for why the Dutch seem so comfortable with gedogen, this grey area between legal and illegal, there are almost as many opinions about its history as there are people in Holland.
In the 16th and 17th century, when the Dutch, let's say, open up the cities for refugees, political refugees or religious refugees, from these days on, they wanted to have these people here because they want to make money. And the Dutch are real merchants, and I think that was the beginning of gedogen. I mean, they want to do business, they want to have your business, and they don't mind if you're from the Islam or if you're Christian, or just bring your business to our country, and we're happy with that.
The Dutch were amongst those who enthusiastically led the social and sexual revolutions of the 1950s and 60s, with early widespread acceptance of abortion, the contraceptive pill, and legalization of the sex industry. Today it's not locals, but tourists who frequent Amsterdam's red light district, fascinated by such an open, crime-free and socially tolerated display of human sexuality. As with human sexuality, so with human mortality. The Dutch first confronted the issue of euthanasia 200 years ago.
In Amsterdam there was a person who killed his wife on her request, and that was the first time that it came to court, and the judge said it is not good what he did, but understandable. His wife was suffering so much that so he put a cushion on her head and she died.
Quick, quick, after, quick, quick, slow, quick, quick, forward, quick, quick, slow, quick, quick,
It wasn't until the 60s that euthanasia again became part of the Dutch political agenda. It did so because of the efforts of people like Ellie de Hulu, a convert to euthanasia after watching her 6-year-old daughter lose a long and terrible battle with cancer.
When my eldest daughter was sick, we couldn't talk about euthanasia with our family doctor. That was not usual. It was not possible to get euthanasia. So she had to die in a natural way.
Which meant a long and a painful death.
Yes, and it was terrible.
And in.
Today, Ellie de Hulu spends a deal of her time helping her surviving daughter in her work of making life more bearable for people confined to wheelchairs. And when she's not doing that, she's arguing the cause of euthanasia, as she has done now for 30 years.
Do you think that had euthanasia been available in the 60s, that that's a route that you would have taken for your daughter?
Yes, oh yes.
No doubt about it.
No doubt about it, no.
And how could one make that decision on behalf of a 6-year-old child?
Well, that is a little bit difficult, for she didn't speak about her illness and we didn't speak with her. But I think it has to be possible that a child says, well, make an end on my life. It is so terrible, I can't bear it longer.
Almost 3 decades after their daughter died, Ellie's merchant seaman husband was diagnosed with terminal cancer. When the pain became too much, they'd already decided together how he should die.
Well, one morning he said, today it is enough for me, you have to call our doctor. And our doctor came and he gave 2 injections, and after some moments it was over.
And you'd had your chance to say goodbye?
Yes, we said, have a good trip. Just as we said when we left the ship.
Back in the 1970s, there were in fact plenty of Dutch doctors quietly breaking the law. Cancer specialist Aycke Smook was amongst them. He could see no logical or ethical objection when terminally ill patients asked him to end their suffering.
In my situation in hospital, also with the head nurse of the ward, and then we went in sneaky in the rooms, and we ended life on request of the patient, of course. And afterwards, after have a coffee or something like that, we phoned the family that their relative died. Unfortunately, we found him dead in bed.
Like many of his colleagues in the 70s, Dr. Smook tired of the hypocrisy of sneaky euthanasia. So they began to challenge the law by reporting their actions to the coroner, and discovered that judges were prepared to accept that exceptional cases of great pain from terminal illness warranted euthanasia. Dr. Smook's moment in court came when he pushed the boundaries by ending a patient's life at home rather than in hospital.
In 1992 I was prosecuted after having helped a patient to die at home, and so I went 3 times to court, and in the final court they said the prosecutor is not accepted, the charge is not accepted, so he is free. And it was the first time in a euthanasia case that there was no verdict of guilty.
Like our own politicians, confronted by growing public debate on such a huge ethical dilemma, Dutch lawmakers in The Hague were paralyzed by indecision. For decades, they did nothing, taking the easy option of allowing the courts to make decisions and lay down the law for them.
What they indeed said was, leave it to the judiciary. And what happened in this country is that in the final, it was the Supreme Court which made decisions which laid down conditions in which euthanasia might be justified. Very strict conditions.
So in other words, it was an issue that was too hard for politicians to deal with, and they left it to the courts to make the laws, really.
Yes, they did the same with strikes of government officials, for instance. Also, too hot a political issue, so leave it to the courts.
This is we call a will. I believe you call it a living will. In here are a few forms.
Despite the importance of the decision to legalize euthanasia, Dutch people will actually notice few changes under the new regime. And for doctors, the main difference is that a police investigator and prosecution is no longer a threat.
The one is in green is the euthanasia will. As a doctor, you need this will. If you don't have this will, and if it is this will or it's handwritten, people can write it themselves, but they have to undersign it. If you don't have this will, euthanasia cannot go on. Or
Regional ethics committees now review each case to ensure procedures were followed and that a second independent medical opinion confirmed that the illness was terminal and the patient was suffering unbearable pain and also voluntarily sought euthanasia.
I think in all Western countries there is a practice of euthanasia and assisted suicide.
Anyway, regardless of the law.
Regardless of the law.
Professor Van Oudvorst spent years investigating euthanasia in Holland and around the world before helping draft the law that politicians finally accepted last year.
Do you think you're taking something of a step into the unknown?
Oh yeah, that's right.
And is that a risk?
That's a risk. But a controlled risk, I think. But we have to realize that we sometimes are making steps in the dark, so I'm not afraid.
Yet unease remains about what the Dutch have done, even amongst those who believe euthanasia should be an option. They're concerned that unless the society shows more compassion, the elderly and infirm may begin to feel forced towards euthanasia for lack of alternatives. At 88, Jansie has a few days left to live. Afflicted by a terminal cancer, she's chosen to die naturally at a hospice for the terminally ill in the provincial city of Alkmaar. Yet it is her good fortune to find one of only 84 hospice beds available in a country of 16 million people.
Is that enough?
No, that's not enough. We need more, much more than 84 beds. Because I think about 1,000 will be a bit sufficient to fulfill the need for hospice beds.
Elis believes euthanasia is only acceptable if the alternatives of hospices and palliative care are equally available to the terminally ill.
Do you think the government has failed in some ways, that whilst it's pushed ahead with euthanasia now, it has failed to push ahead with these alternatives?
I think so. When the only way out seems to be euthanasia, you have to inform people what choices they have. They want to have choices for other forms of caretaking at home or in a hospice or in a nursing home with special hospice places or in special units in the hospital.
The elderly homes here, they're overfilled.
The Christian Democrats originally opposed euthanasia. Having lost that battle, they're trying to ensure the government puts money into the alternatives, palliative care and hospices.
We have a lack of personnel. People can only be showered or being washed once or twice in a week. So people don't feel very, very comfortable in thinking that they will get old or perhaps die under such circumstances. So I think in these circumstances it's very, well, you should be very careful to talk about euthanasia as if it were a normal way to end your life. It's not a choice, it's something terrible that could happen, and we don't want people to die like that.
And it is to these concerns that Holland's churches point in what appears to be a rearguard action against the widespread acceptance of euthanasia.
For me, the most terrible thing that it is so-called freedom with which you choose for the death, but in fact it will be forced by my surrounding because I am such a burden for my family and so on. And then the old mother says, doctor, I am such a burden for my children, make an end on it. So-called liberty.
Do you think, in the end, legal euthanasia is going to make it a lot cheaper for the state?
No.
In terms of not having
Dat
to
kan-
name
kan
palliative
bieden-
care,
No,
hospices?
no, I think, and there's not a reason to legalize it.
No, but there's some people who argue that
Yes,
is the way
yes,
that this
but
nation's
that is
going.
not true. That is not
You
true.
know, older people are no longer of any use. It's better to encourage them to commit euthanasia.
No. In any case, a patient, an old man or woman, has to take his own decision.
Already, the boundaries of who can die and under what circumstances are being pushed to the limit.
During the past few years, we saw that practice developed into a direction that was not debated on. We saw that in the first place we were thinking of terminally ill people, and after a couple of years also mentally ill people, elderly, and people who were tired of life came into the picture, and that doctors who committed euthanasia on these people were not being prosecuted.
Last year saw the case come to the highest appeals court in Amsterdam of a respected doctor who helped end the life of a controversial former Dutch senator who was suffering no physical illness at all. 86-year-old Edward Brongsma told the doctor his life had become a void and that he longed for death. After months of discussion and obtaining a second opinion, the doctor, Philip Sutorius, agreed to help the old man with a lethal cocktail of drugs.
The Sutorius case is a case about a 86-year-old man, an academic, who was just tired of living. He was clear with his mind. He just said, I am tired of living. Please help me. Let me do it the decent way instead of the indecent way by, doing it the violent way.
Yet, even in the Sutorius case, the prosecutor sought a very Dutch solution.
My legal opinion is that Dr. Sutorius is a fantastic doctor, and I asked the Court of Appeal, please declare him guilty, but don't impose him any penalty, because he is a brilliant man, apart from that he went one step too far.
And steps still further are being talked about in Holland today. Beyond today's limits of euthanasia for people suffering terminal illness and unbearable pain may lie the suicide pill. It was first proposed by a retired Supreme Court judge called Drian. Many think it is an extreme proposition, but in a very Dutch way, they don't shy away from the debate.
Are thinking about a pill who has to be taken at 2 or 3 moments. So you have the first pill and you can think, okay, I will live longer. So the second pill, the third pill, I don't take them. When you jump from a train, or from a roof, it is 1 moment and you die.
The next step could be the suicide pill then, could it not?
Oh yeah, it could be.
And you'd accept that as well as a possibility at least?
Yes, I accept that as a possibility. But I think we are not far enough to regulate and attack the possible negative side effects.
I think it is a bit of a decadent discussion as well. It seems as if we would live in a society where people make rational choices, where everybody is in the circumstances that he has seen all of the world, sits in his library and thinks, well, I've had it, and now I can choose to die, because we have the discussion on the pill of Drion.
You can say when you are 60 you have seen enough of the world, but there are youngsters that have seen more than many elderly people in the world and say, this is not my way of life, and I don't want to exist in this terrible world any longer.
Would you not expect to see a huge increase in the number of suicides, particularly amongst young people?
Okay, and why not? What is wrong of it? People has to
Because life has got to be a lot more valuable than that, hasn't it?
Yes, but if you are in a situation that you don't find your life valuable to go on, and then at that moment it is better to take a pill than to jump before a train.
In the Netherlands, euthanasia is possible because we have gedogenbeleid. We have a strange population.
No one knows where the debate will take the Dutch people, and it remains a deep, emotional, professional and ethical dilemma for young doctors setting out to make life better for their patients.
And many of that things that is more or less solved, and we think that is normal, but when you look abroad, they have so big eyes to see what's possible in our country.
With euthanasia now out in the open, young doctors at least have the chance to candidly discuss the dilemma that they are certain to face.
Have you any idea how you are likely to respond as a person the first time a patient says to you, "Doctor, please help me end my life"?
I don't know how I will respond. Of course, you think about it, and I have already made up my mind, so to speak. I think I would help a person.
Do you think in your medical career euthanasia is something that you would be able to deal with?
No, it's very difficult for me, and I'm sure I will not do it in my career.
Why not?
Because of a lot of reasons, religion and principle.
I think everybody should be able to end their life in the way they wanted it to. And I also think it's especially a doctor's place to help in that situation.
Well, obviously you two are totally in disagreement with each other. Can you respect each other's views?
Yes, of course.
Totally. Yeah.
I think it will always stay difficult. It will never be easy, no matter how long you think about it.
In the beginning I said, I don't think I can do that, so I won't. And but then...
What changed your mind?
The suffering of the patient.
At Wyk aan Zee, the local GP, Dr Van Oudvorst, lives just a few doors away from George van Luijk. They became close as George's wife Henny confessed her desire to end her pain by ending her life. The doctor's now a regular visitor, as is Corrine Zwietenk, a grief counsellor.
You can see the head.
George first confronted the prospect of euthanasia when Henny crafted a figurine of herself after having had a cancerous breast removed.
Haar hoofd naar beneden, haar handen zo, en haar litteken.
The scar, for where the breast was removed.
Yes. And this was the most painful. Dit was het meest pijnlijke deel van haar. En zo voelde zij zich, het hoofd naar beneden. Yeah. Ze was toen in een hele diepe depressie. En daarna is ze eigenlijk nooit meer echt... vrolijk is ze nooit meer geworden. Maar toen zat ze dus heel erg in de put. Toen ze dit maakte.
There were months of doubt. But when the time came, it came quickly.
Dus ik belde de dokter en ik was aan het huilen. Dokter, kom meteen. Dus meteen, de dokter stond hier. En toen weer met Henny praten. Weet je het zeker? Weet je het zeker? Weet je het zeker? Ja, ik weet het zeker. Ik weet het zeker, zei ze.
At the end, you know, you know the question. At the end, you know what is going to happen, probably. And the second thing is, if you know somebody well, you start to like persons, and that makes it very difficult. Yeah.
Mijn dochter was ook thuis. Die lag nog in bed. Die heb ik gehaald. Die ook verteld.
Would you like to stop, George?
En toen zei mijn dochter, ik wist het. Ik voelde dat het vandaag ging gebeuren.
At the moment from doing giving the person the medication, I just try to block out all emotions and just work like a machine.
En dan word ik 100 jaar, dat beeld verlies ik nooit meer uit mijn gedachten. Dat zal ik altijd onthouden. Verschrikkelijk is dat.
You obviously miss Henny, but were you glad to have been able to see her on her way?
Yes.
With dignity.
I'm glad and I'm sad. I'm glad that I was there. Zit ik in het Engels? Ik was blij dat ik erbij was. Maar het was verschrikkelijk om het te zien. Ik weet niet. Ja, het is goed dat ik het gezien heb. Je kunt het niet meer terugdraaien. Dan kan ik beter het gezien hebben dan niet gezien hebben. Want als ik niet gezien zou hebben en ik zou later denken, had ik het maar wel gezien, kan ik het niet meer terugdraaien. Dus ik ben blij dat ik het gezien heb. Ik heb haar hand vastgehouden en ik voelde eens die hand slap.
You're crying inside. Outside also, but inside mostly. But especially with Henny, and George can tell us that also. She was so happy I came there. Everybody was sad, she was happy. And that is so strange. You come there, you feel like, if she greets you like a good friend, she greets you like, almost Santa Claus or somebody like that.
There is an end for us all, of course. Illness, accidents and old age account for the vast majority of the 140,000 deaths each year in Holland. But already, one person in 40, 3,500 a year, chooses to die by euthanasia. In his mourning, George Van Oudvorst is comforted by knowing that the woman he loved died at a moment of her choosing. Letting her go was George's final act of love.